Welcome to A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story. I'm Anton van der Walt. This is a podcast about starting over. It is about what it takes to leave the familiar behind and the courage it takes to begin again in a land that isn't yet home. Together with my co-host Ben Liebenberg, we explore the untold stories of migration. Not just where people went, but why they left, what they held on to, and what they've had to let go. Each episode, we sit down with someone who's made that leap. Someone who's left behind not just places, but languages, careers, communities, and sometimes even parts of themselves. They share what called them forward, what nearly held them back, and what they've come to understand about identity, belonging, and starting again. Produced in partnership with Southern Crossings, a community for South Africans forging new lives in Australia, this podcast is a place to feel seen, heard, and understood. Because this isn't just about visas or paperwork. It's about identity, loss, hope, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life piece by piece. So wherever you are on your journey, arriving, settling, or still thinking about it, welcome. This is where stories connect us all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This information to customers travelling on the land airways. Flight LA 800 approach Germiston, Qantas 321, service to Auckland and Santiago.
Well, welcome to another episode of A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story. Today we are doing episode number 22, and it's really stoked to have a fantastic guest here today, Ben. How are you keeping?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Anton. Self?
Yeah, you're in Ballarat again today, right?
Yeah, traveling for work and phoning from my hotel room. But yeah, like you, I'm really excited for today's episode. We've had a quick chat to Paul. He sent us a few notes about himself. So yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. I think, as you said but earlier, I think this is going to be flawless.
Yes, it is.
No pressure.
Yeah, so let me immediately start introduce Paul Fontanot. Now, our guest was born and raised in the east end of Johannesburg, in the old mining city of Germiston, a place shaped by gold industry and generations of migrant families. Paul's story is deeply layered. His family roots stretch back to Wales and Italy, with both his father and his wife's father arriving in South Africa after the Second World War, growing up side by side in Germiston's tight-knit Italian community. Paul trained as a chartered accountant and began his career at Ernst & Young, moving early into forensic accounting. And it's interesting, forensic accounting, when I exchanged emails with Paul in the beginning, you get an email back and there's about 6 paragraphs of disclaimers. So then you know you are working with a forensic accountant. Following the trail of white-collar crime, illicit funds and complex financial misconducts. His work took him from Johannesburg to Chicago, where he's still in his 20s. He was leading investigations tied to some of the largest corporate cases at the time. But as Paul and his wife began raising a young family, they reached a harder conclusion that the South Africa they loved was no longer a place they wanted to raise their children. With Ernst & Young's support, they made the decision to start again, arriving in Sydney in January of 2008, with 2 small children just months before the global financial crisis hit. What a time to come. What followed was a period of deep adjustment, learning a new way of working, finding community, softening edges, and rebuilding confidence. Through faith, belonging, and backing himself, when there was no turning back, Paul slowly made Australia home. Today, he's not only built a distinguished professional career, including becoming a first non-legal equity partner in an Australian law firm. Congratulations, Paul, for that. But has also given back extensively through long-term community and educational leadership. So welcome, Paul. Really stoked to have you here.
Thank you very much, Anton and Ben, and I'm honored to be here on the program, and I thank you for allowing me to share my story. I look forward to the podcast.
Yeah, we are too. And before we run away with this, as you know, this, as we said to you offline, it's almost like a fireside chat or a chat in a bar, having, Ben and I, that's how we started this podcast, over a glass of red wine, right? Because we said there are other people that have got the same issue. So what is not in your bio, Paul, is the fact that you are part of the winemaking industry here in Hunter, right? Tell us about that.
That's correct. Part of a hobby that I've always had interest of wine, and my father-in-law is in the wine industry in Cape Town. And so when we had the opportunity to procure or purchase a little hobby farm, I thought, well, let me plant some vines, and if I plant them now, by the time I retire, I can actually do something with them. And so for the last 5 years that we've had the place, I've been growing the vines and buying grapes in at the moment, just to kind of test my knowledge. And so I've made 4 vintages, all Shiraz wine. Must say the first 3 were not so great, but
Right.
I got in somewhere, and YouTube taught me, and a little bit of insights from friends and family. But the 2025 vintage, I'm going to be bottling it now in the next week or so, is called Redemption. And it's
Nice.
I think it's a good,
That's a good name.
bottle, and it's,
What,
and so hopefully.
what gave rise to the name, Paul?
Oh, a good story. So my father-in-law was out last year and helping me with my, hopefully, the 4th batch. And he accidentally put too much sulfite in it. And sulfite is really a small batch of sulfite, normally about 70 grams in 500 liters.
Yes.
Just kills off any bacteria. And unfortunately, he put 7 kilograms in it. And destroyed the wine completely. And so when I made the batch in 2025, I said to him, I'll do this one, you watch. And he's the winemaker, he's in the industry.
All right.
And it's turned out to be fantastic. And so I thought, we got to call it Redemption, simply because we're redeeming my father-in-law. I'm sure the story will get to him, but yes.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And yeah, it's interesting. It's a beautiful segue, Paul, to talk about our every pod episode. We have a little suitcase moment, and it's almost like some history that is relevant between South Africa and Australia. And so I thought, maybe the story here is about Australian grapes and wine, right? So the story begins with a South African touch, the whole thing in the Hunter Valley. I don't know if you know that, but the first wines arrived in Australia with Captain Arthur Phillip and the first fleet in 1788. And on the way to Sydney, they took cuttings from the Cape of Good Hope and planted them in Farm Cove, early trials, and also from Brazil at the time, but early trials that set the course. They wasn't successful, but in 1832 to 33, James Busby, he's regarded as the father of Australian wine, returned to New South Wales with a curated collection of European wines, including material gathered in the Cape of Good Hope, and propagated duplicates at Kirkton in the Hunter Valley, with William Kelman distributing cuttings across the colony. By 1840, the Hunter had 500 or more than 500 acres under vine, and families like Lindeman, Drayton, Tulloch, Tyrrell, and Wilkinson, names we all know, right, built a continuous tradition. Yep. So a boutique pour in the Hunter today carries a lineage that literally runs through the Cape before it took root in the Hunter Valley. So there you go.
Well, I'm certainly going to be adding that history to the little cellar door we have, and show. Look, I'm just one of many that stood on the shoulders of others. So,
right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. So Ben, over to you.
Yeah. So normally, Paul, we obviously, you've got a lot of things that we can talk about, but we'd like to go back and understand, the person, where you come from. So you're obviously from the East Rand and grew up there. So tell us a little bit about your youth, your family, how you grew up, and siblings. How did you find life in South Africa growing up?
Well, we had a lovely life. I mean, Germiston was a booming town in the 70s and 80s, and I've got two older sisters. So I was the youngest, and I was the boy. And coming from my dad being Italian, it was the boy had finally arrived, and so it's lovely growing up in Germiston. Downside to that is my grandparents, the Italian side of my dad's side, went back to Italy. And so, I knew of them and we interacted at limited times. But we didn't speak Italian. My mom, who's from a Welsh descent, said English has got to be spoken. And so, I missed out on that capability of speaking Italian. But, the town itself was a vibrant town. I went to Germiston High, a local public school, a school that my dad went to, a public school. And, at school I was very interested in sports and gym and, girls and, other than, schooling. And my sister, who's a year older than me, my middle sister, she was always the Ducks of the Year and getting awards and etc. So I said, well, you carry on with that. I'm going to party and and sail through life. Funny enough, when got to matric or year 12, as we know it here in Australia, I'd decided I was going on my schoolies down to Cape Town with some mates, and I didn't get into university with my marks at all. Into well-known universities, the Witzes of the world. And so I went down to Cape Town thinking I'll get into hotel management at one of the technicons. And I didn't get in because my Afrikaans mark was so bad. And so now I'm stuck thinking, well, the world owes me a lot of things and, with my friends down in Cape Town. And my sister actually applied to UNISA and got me into doing 3 subjects. That's the most they would give me with my marks. And in accounting, a BCom degree. And I remember her phoning me and saying, you better come back because next week you start your courses at Midrand campus. Mm-hmm. And I was furious. I said, well, how dare you? I'm having a holiday. What are you doing in my life? And, anyway. So I started at UNISA at Midrand campus doing a BCom. And I finished my degree within the 4-year period because it obviously was restricted to the 3 subjects in the first year. Mm. But I finished my day. The distinctions. I got into Ernst & Young straight away. I passed my board exam within the 1 sitting. And I became, an employee very quickly in the field of accounting. And it was just a passion of mine.
What was the difference between, if I can interrupt you for a sec,
yes.
The difference between, your school, which really, you didn't give you the marks to go to uni, but you go to uni and you get to the right thing and then suddenly you excel. What was it? What is it in school that you didn't do?
I think just applied myself. At school, I was very happy to play sports and mess around. And so school, I just wasn't interested in doing languages. I wasn't interested in doing biology and science and all the things that you had to do. But give me a calculator and give me a set of books and numbers, very happy with. And so accounting in the BCom degree was what I enjoyed.
Did your sister?
And I think that there's an element of maybe a boy, you mature older, mate.
Did your sister choose the subjects for you and said, "Okay, that's him"?
That's exactly. She did all of that for me. So I must say, I take my hat off to her, and I thank her for setting me on the right course.
It's interesting,
And so
Paul.
Ernst & Young was my career.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that happens to you. The reason why I ask you this question is that I had a similar kind of thing that I remember happening at school, because I was not doing well in any of the subjects. It didn't interest me, and the only things that I liked was business subjects and economics and business economics, and I was okay with maths and that sort of thing. And then by the time, so school was terrible for me, and my father just said to me, just do maths, otherwise you're not going to go to university, which I did.
Yep.
And then I got into university, and suddenly I did industrial psychology, and that was just so much nicer. And it's a similar thing, right? I wasn't good in accountancy, by the way. Yeah.
Well, maybe industrial relate. I'm not. That's not me. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so the light. I just think the light switched on, and I got into the right crowd. I some really good mates at uni, and you get to find yourself. There's probably also an element of you've got to build your career. No one's going to give it to you, and I think the light switched on that aspect too. That said, where do you want to be in your life? And so, I've always been a determined person, whether it was sports or in board games as I was growing up. And so in doing my degree in qualifying, I keep on saying to people, I came 11th in the board exam. And everyone said, oh, that's brilliant. Well done. 11th in the country. I said, yes, yeah. Well, they only announced the top 10. So.
Well, who's gonna know, right?
Who's gonna know? Yeah.
Exactly. Very good.
Yeah.
So you obviously finished your CA. You're working for Ernst & Young. So your life's good. But you tend to go into forensic analysis. So how does that happen? How do you make that? I mean, you come out of uni and you start there. How do you get down that track
into that field? Well, funny enough, at the time there wasn't a uni course that taught you forensic accounting or that type of investigation skills. So it was a new area. But I, as I was doing my auditing and qualified through my finished my articles, auditing was just not for me. And the reason for that is I kept on wanting to ask the next question. This balance doesn't tick and tie, or doesn't add up, or this explanation given just doesn't sound right. And I'd always ask why not, and where's this, and etc. And I remember at the time my audit manager saying, well, Paul, we're just auditing the accounts. It's below materiality. The numbers look fair and reasonable. They must be right. And so I wanted to ask the next question. So I transferred to this newly formed division, forensic accounting, in Ernst & Young, and it was made up primarily of ex-policemen. So law enforcement. And so, learning with them and their skills of interviewing and interrogation, obviously not physical interrogation, but, the way that they interviewed and looked at things, I learned a lot from them, but I'd applied my accounting skills and say, well, where's the money flow? And if you think of most disputes or frauds, it's all about the money. And if you can follow the flow of funds, you'll uncover how it was accounted for, which bank account, where'd the money go, and that intrigued me. And so the satisfaction of piecing the puzzle together, and then pointing out and saying, well, that's it, Anton, you did it, 2 million rand, and here's your bank account, and let's pass this over to the police. Or to the Scorpion unit at the time, and it was a great satisfaction.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I'm thinking maybe it's completely the wrong assumption that I make, but I would imagine you would have turned out also a really good lawyer at the same time, right?
Well, there's the skill sets. If you think of all doing what we do, you need legal because you need to understand the legal process.
Yeah.
And quite often it was the ex-law enforcement police detectives who had the law degree, and so they knew the criminal way of gathering evidence and putting a brief of evidence together. But there were also lawyers in the team, and so I was just the accounting in the team. It was it was made up of me, a technology person, someone who can sift information out of a mobile phone, or at the time it was laptops or computers, and then obviously the investigator from ex-law enforcement and a lawyer. So you need those skill sets.
But I also would
to
imagine
actually
that there's another skill set that you need, and that you need to understand people really well. Because in order to get to the dot from here to there to the next thing, you need to also anticipate behavior, right? And say, well, they're going to
Correct.
possibly do these things. Where did you get that from?
Just learnt along the way. So you do interview skills techniques courses. Is the person looking up and left? Are they lying, or down and right? Are they nervous?
Yes,
What's their body language is doing? Are they fidgeting? Etc. So you learn that behavior. And so there are obviously courses and that they teach you that. But after doing it for 30 years in all different continents and countries, it's people are people, and it's not a system or a process that causes fraud. It's people. So you're absolutely right. Understanding people is a crux. My learnt behavior is I know the answer before I ask the question. And so I want to know what you're going to tell me, but I won't tell you I know it.
Well, Paul, that's exactly right. That's why I was kind of mentioning the lawyer thing. The most important thing that a lawyer taught me, because I was in HR and often had to do these investigations, he said to me that the most important thing when you do cross-examination, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. And that's exactly right, because that's the powerful part, but that's the investigation part that gets you there in the first place, isn't it?
That's exactly, and there's different, as you will know, different ways to go about it. But you do need to have the rules of natural justice. Tell us your story first, and that also helps guide guide the conversation where it wants to go. But to your point is I having found information, whether it's on a laptop or mobile phone or photograph or a bank account or wherever the sources of information that we can find, if they're lying or not. When you start producing the document and you go through your file, is this your signature on the document? Yes. All right. Is this your employment contract? Yes. Is this your photograph of you? Do you know the developer? No, I've never seen him. Well, is this the photograph of you and him on a Bali beach, arm in arm? Oh, where'd you get that photograph? I'm asking the questions.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you started in that department?
I would have been around 26 or 27 when I went in to the forensic accounting team. I'd spent some time in America doing, I thought, white collar crime, but it was more commercial litigation type work. So quantification of a damage, company A buys company B. And then once the ownership changes, you realize that the assets weren't there or the liabilities are higher than what you thought. And so now you want to sue, but the question is, how much do you sue for? And so part of my work was then quantifying the damage that you can sue for. So again, working with lawyers. So all of my career, it was this natural fit with hand in glove with a legal team. And so, I know when we're jumping a bit, but when I was obviously here in Australia, a large part of the law firms would outsource that investigation and or technology and components to the big four accounting firms or boutique investigation or insolvency firms. And so Clayton Utes, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We're thinking of doing something and doing something new." And hence they'd asked me to come on board, and I joined them as a partner back in 2017 from EY to them. And it was a lot of my friends and the big four were looking at this saying, "Why are you going to a law firm? This has never been done in Australia. It's going to be a failure." And I looked at it and said, "Well, I'm brave enough, and if I get it wrong, I can move back into the big four type world. If I get it right, well, it'll be a feather in my cap and happy days." And almost 8 years into it, built a team of about 150 people and 5 partners, and very successful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you mentioned America. So just trying to get a bit of a timeline here. So you said you went over to America. How long did you go over for, and when was that?
So it was early in my career. So I'd finished my articles as a chartered accountant, and I was thinking about where to go from here. And EY, like any of the big four, they have secondments, and so I'd put up my hand saying I'd love to go over to America on a 2-year contract. And so my wife and I, we're newlywed. Okay. She was a teacher. She just started teaching, and I said, "Oh, by the way, honey, next year we're going overseas." And so she only really taught for a year before we left. Now, the downside of that is I had a work visa with Ernst & Young, but she didn't have a visa, a work visa. And so I take my hat off to her, and she gracefully came across with me and, couldn't work. But yes, so that was I was over there in 2002.
Where did you go over? Where in the States?
Chicago. So it was based in Chicago. And funny, in America, when you go to work, you almost jump on a plane and you go somewhere to work. And so out of those 2 years, I added up the nights that I was in the apartment with my wife in Chicago. It ended up being 4 months out of 24 months.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
Because EY flew me all over, doing these investigations. So,
what was your experience like? How did you find it working there? America can be quite different.
Look, yes, it was. From a mobility perspective, that I at the end of the 2 years, they'd asked me to stay on, and my wife just said, "Thanks, Paul, but we're going back now."
Fair enough.
But from a culture of work ethic, it was very much, you get on with the job, and the cream rises to the top, and they were very much, well, if you don't like things, then you leave. And so for me, I enjoyed applying myself in this new world as a chartered accountant from South Africa, which was a new concept to the Americans. But the chartered accountancy qualification is world recognized. And so I knew all sorts of accounting principles and policies around construction versus revenue recognition versus mining to financial services. And so I was one of those resources that every job wanted me on, because one, if you're out of town, you're working 10-hour days. You're not going back to a home. You're living in a hotel room. So as a young person, I was there to work as hard as I could to get the experience.
Yeah.
So do you think that was kind of like set the tone later on when you decided to come to Australia, that you thought, well, I've been to the States and it was okay, and you made it work. Do you think that helped you, or did it play a part, or not really?
Ben, it absolutely did, because in America, the mindset was we're here for 2 years. And so we're here, we experiencing it and doing everything we can, but knowing we're going back.
Yep.
Coming to Australia, we knew it was a one-way ticket. And in the sense that we mentally made that decision before making the decision. And so it absolutely helped. When we got here, we knew it was going to be tough settling in. We knew it was going to be tough finding, let's call it school fees. When you go to Coles, Woolies, I mean, the Woolies is not the Woolworths we know back in South Africa. No. And so, you get there and it's like, well, all I want is some milk. And here you get a variety of milk choices. And so you buy this choice and now you don't like that. And you buy that choice, now you don't. Versus South Africa, the choices weren't there. And so you spend a lot of money by trying new things like feta cheese. I mean, how many feta cheeses are there here in the supermarkets?
Right.
And so for us living in America, we knew it was going to be difficult, but we knew that we've overcome it before. And so we just need to ride through the difficulties and be resilient as a family here. So it absolutely played a key part on us settling in.
But I can relate to that. I didn't go and work, but when I was finished with varsity, I went over to Europe and just mucked around and played rugby for about 2 years, traveling and then. But it was always the same thing, You always knew, look, it's temporary. You're going to go back. You treat it a bit like a holiday, like an adventure. And that mindset from coming over here is definitely different. If you go, well, okay, that's it. This is long term. This is permanent. It does mentally somehow change things.
So, what was the time frame between leaving or coming back from Chicago or US, and then coming to Australia? How many years was that?
So we got back from America in 2002. And we left left South Africa in 2007 to come here. So we were back for 5 years. And it was that 5 years of I became a partner at EY South Africa. There was a stint in Canada because I had relationships now, work relationships with networks in America, and that were shared in Canada, and there was a job out there that needed some work done on a financial restatement of one of the largest telecommunications companies in Canada. And so I got the phone call that said, Paul, we know you know your stuff. Could you come over here and help?
Yes.
And so in about 2003 to 2004, I was in Canada doing this financial restatement, and that made me help with my business case becoming a partner of Ernst & Young, and of which I was 29 years old when I became a partner in South Africa.
That's amazing.
And
that's
2 years later, we then immigrated to Australia.
But what precipitated that decision for you deciding to come across? I know by now you kind of, you got out of South Africa, you've tasted the rest of the world, or at least America and Canada now. What made you want to come? Firstly, leave, and then secondly, to Australia.
I suppose we saw what kind of a first world country could be. America, they talk at the time, they spoke about bigger and better. Well, it was certainly bigger. Everything was bigger. The people were bigger. The food sizes were bigger. Everything was bigger. The cars were bigger. Everything's bigger. Yeah. Whether it was better or not, that's a different story. And so we saw what this first world country and system looks like. And so when we were back in South Africa for those 5 years, or in and out, we kind of said to each other as a couple, as a married couple, is do we want to raise our children in South Africa, knowing what we know? And the probably four main reasons. We were sitting in a nice fancy gated community in near Bedford View in Modderfontein, and a golfing course. One of the Thornhill Estate it was called, and lovely house, and armed guards at the security posts, and you drive in and cameras and all of that. And we were sitting having dinner with some friends. There must have been 6 or 7 friends one evening, and as we sipping on some red wine, the conversation goes, "Oh, do you know Sarah so and so?" And remember, she was in our class at university. Well, guess what? Sarah was hijacked 3 days ago, driven to a bush or veldt and raped 3 times, and beaten up. But don't worry, she's in the hospital. She's okay now, and everything's fine. And then the very next part of the conversation is, "Oh, by the way, tomorrow's going to be a nice sunny day. Should we go and play some golf?" And and it's like, well, hang on, we've normalized this situation in a conversation that's not normal. It shouldn't be normal. And so the 4 things was the volatility of the political situation in South Africa at the time. It was happening. The heightened risk of violent crime. I had, at that stage, we had our daughter was born, so, female, and my wife was worrying about rape and carjackings and everything else. And touch wood, we weren't affected by those things. The prevalence of AIDS was in the sub-Saharan Africa, and it was a problem. If you have a violent crime of rape, you can overcome the trauma, but what happens if you carry then the AIDS epidemic, and then the economic demise of the country? I was a partner of a firm that I was told affirmative action, so even if I wanted to hire my son, I couldn't in a Big Four environment because the pecking order was males are at the bottom. So we just looked at it and said, surely there's a better place. And with Ernst & Young, I put up my hand and said, we're keen to move. And they said, well, come back to America. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. They said, come to London. And I said, well, that's lovely, but my wife, I looked at her and she said, I don't want to raise kids in London in a small rain, etc. And then obviously Australia was the other option. Yes. And, same hemisphere, same climate or similar climate, and a big town, Sydney. And so they flew me over, and my wife, she was probably about 4 months pregnant with my son. And we came over for our LSD session, look, see, and decide. And they wined and dined us for a week. And, we decided that this is the place for us. And so by, I think we flew in on the 31st of December 2007. And so we had jet lag so we can watch the fireworks then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice time to fly in Sydney specifically. But so tell us a bit about leaving South Africa, because yes, all those things, I think as South Africans we can relate to that, and a lot of people on the pod that we speak to can relate to one or many of those that you just spoke about. But as we speak to people as well, it's not that easy either. It's not that peed off with a place there and you want to leave. We're all South Africans at heart, and it's tough. So tell us a little bit about that. Leaving South Africa, what are the things that you miss, and how did that feel from that perspective?
No, absolutely. Even to today, almost 20 years on, it's still the 4 of us, my wife and I, and my 2 children. Our 2 children are the only ones to have left. So everyone, both sets of parents, the grandparents have obviously now passed on, but siblings, their kids, our nephews and nieces and cousins, everyone is still back in South Africa. So, which makes it tough because you don't, particularly for our children, they don't get to see their cousins and their grandparents as much, or their aunts and uncles. Technology helps. You can do Skype calls and Zoom calls, etc., and now with FaceTime. But it's not the same thing as being here in family Christmas holidays, or hey, Granny's coming over for lunch. We adopted a grandparent here in Australia because the schools often had grandparent days.
Right.
And so, we couldn't fly a grandparent in just for the tea in the morning. So it ended up being, hey, let's find someone here that we can send. So on the family front, it's tough because we are still apart. Now we go back from time to time. The challenge with that is I want to go on holiday and sit, in Fiji, or I want to go to Europe. And I've only got a 5 period of holiday. So, and then you end up talking the same things with 10 different people in the family. It's the same conversations. And then it inevitably gets into, well, South Africa's better, Australia's worse, and there's a back and forth.
That's just a mess.
And so it's a mess. Yeah. So we miss family, and we miss that connection, is a big one.
Because I would
my
imagine
wife is very...
Sorry, Paul. I would imagine, part Italian heritage, that family gatherings must be a big thing, right?
Correct. No, that's exactly. I mean, every Sunday, growing up, and even when Gabby, my wife, when we were engaged and married, every Sunday it was at one of the aunts or my grand's house, or family lunch, and everyone arrives and everyone has lunch, and then the cards come out, and you play rummy or rummy cup, and 10 rand in, and that's where I got my pocket money, because I was hoping that I'd win the hand of.
But you
of
could
rummy.
read people from that age, I'm sure.
Well, I think that's probably where I got it from.
Yeah, I think so.
And aunts and uncles and everyone sitting around, it was wonderful. And so, we don't have that. We didn't have that here. And so it's tough. And so having the farm, just to give an example, is there's two friends that we have that we met. In fact, one of them we met on the aeroplane whilst we were immigrating. And unbeknown to us, they were sitting in the same row with similar age kids in tears. And we looked at them and said, "What, are you going on holiday?" And they said, "No, we're immigrating." And so we settled within about 2 kilometers from each other.
Wow.
And they've become our adopted family here. And so every Christmas, we have them over at the farm and getting together. And there's 22 of us now that get together because the kids are getting older and they're bringing their partners, and it's expanding. And we've got this photo album for 20 years of us having Easter and Christmas all together. So yeah, family is a big part, and part of as the intro is finding a sense of belonging was what I learned from America. Coming here is I had to find, and my wife and I had to find, where do we belong? Where is our people? Where's finding a community, and that was important for us to help settle in. And that community could be South Africans, could be, it doesn't matter what the community was.
So apart from these people that you met on the plane, what were the community that you created in Australia? Who were they? I mean, not specific, but were they Australians, South Africans, a mix?
Absolute mix. So the first one was finding a church, finding a church that we could sit and pray together. And I mean, as we all know, immigrating is not easy. There's tough times in the home front. There's tough times in the work front. I mean, I arrived just before the GFC. I'm a new partner of a firm. I mean, my first meeting with a client was someone taking me down to Westpac. I mean, we literally landed. A week later, I started work, and the Monday we're going off to go meet Westpac. And I remember asking my Australian partner, business partner, I said, so what type of mining company is this? Are they gold or copper? Or, what? And he turned to me and he said, no, they're a bank. I said, okay. I mean, being a fraud person, fraud happens anywhere. So I didn't need to know the industry. But, I've gone from that 20 years ago to finding so for me, a community church was important because there were tough times at work, tough times at home. We had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old. There was no other support. There was no Josephine or Philemon at home. You're it. And so, those type of things was important. So at the church was the first year of probably church hopping, finding the right balance and the right message. And we settled on a church in the place that we were going to buy a home. And that was in Turramurra on the North Shore, Upper North Shore. And it was an Anglican church. And, I remember in that first year after the sermon going up to the chaplain or the reverend and crying on his shoulder. And saying, what have I done? I've brought my family. We had this successful career in South Africa, a beautiful home, beautiful, big family. And we've given all of that up for what? So it was tough, really tough. But those communities have helped.
So is that the community that eventually made you stay and say, look, I can live here, I can settle? And how long did that take, Paul, from the time that you arrived until the time that you say, okay, I'm okay?
Yeah, no, the church was one big component. The other was I found like-minded individuals in the workplace. And so, often arrange, weekly breakfast in the city somewhere, and whether a little prayer group or get together, we can just see the story of what they did battling with their work front or their home front. And these were potential clients that were going to buy my services, but they were more friends than business people. But, and it helped me with my network. Because then someone, Johnny would refer me on to Sarah, and Sarah would refer me on to, Johan, or whatever the case was. It took us, my wife and I, a good 2 years to finally say, I think we've arrived. And that, settling kids down in preschools, settling work on the work front, settling into a regular pattern of, people would invite you over for a drink or a meal. I always say, telling a story is good, but breaking some bread whilst telling the story is even better. And so having a meal together is a great way to get connected.
Yeah, but Paul, what I'm hearing you saying is that you come to Australia and I mean, even you would admit it was an easy entrance because they wine and dine you for a week on your LSD trip, and then they bring you across and whatever else, but you still go and cry on the shoulder of the river, and but then what you say is you need to go and do a few things. You can't wait for it to come to you.
Yes.
So you go and you see people on the plane that are in strife of some kind. What's happening? Oh, we're immigrating, and from there on they became your best friends, right? But it's your initiative. And then you go and find a church and say, okay, I think that it's important to belong to that community. It's an easy community to belong to because it's people in a building that wants to be there, right? That are there for a common reason. And then the other thing that you say is I go and seek out people that I've got common interest on and say, yeah, they might be my customers or my clients in future, but they've got common interest. And so that's what I'm hearing you saying. So if you wait for things to come to you, they just don't.
Now, I agree, and I mean, you don't, in my mind, you're not successful in life, whether it's work or family or business or whatever the case is, if you don't put the effort in.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you think of even a married couple, you've got to put the effort in. You've got to show initiative. You've got to, and so it's the same with everything in my life. Has always been, show the initiative and do the first thing. Becoming the first non-lawyer partner. It's the first thing.
Well, was that successful in Clayton?
Clayton Utes. So, I mean, I got to the point where as we were growing, they'd asked me to grow. I did that. And I thought, well, that's great. Downside was I thought maybe I'd retire and my wife will come and join me at the farm. But our kids had left school by that stage, and my wife said, well, I'm going to start teaching again, because she hadn't been paid in work. Yeah. And so she started her career as a teacher, and I said, oh, come on, we're going to the farm now. So I had a year and a half off of relaxing at the farm or working at the farm. And then I started off now about 3 months ago at Grant Thornton, developing their or building their forensic technology practice and investigation practice. Right. And so, I've built the EY one, built the Clayton Utes one, and now I'm building the Grant Thornton one. And to your point, using initiative and, putting yourself forward, I phoned them up and I said, how can I help?
Yeah.
Yep. So, just quickly on the family, you said they left home at that stage. So how did that go? Their schooling and the kids adapting, and your wife and settling down. How did they find it?
Yeah, because they were young when we arrived, they slotted easily in, and in fact, I almost joke about it. They gave us the license to actually make friends, because as young kids you're at play groups or you're in the kids club or the mothers groups and etc. And so often you see the moms or dads pushing the pram, going to coffee shops and getting together. And so it gave us the consent or permission to mix and mingle. But our kids went straight into school, into kindergarten and then schooling system as dinkum Aussies. We got within the 4 years we got our citizenship, and for us this was home. We were never going back, and so for them, they don't know any different other than going on holiday and seeing their family. But this is their home.
Yeah. No, that's very much what we found as well, saying that our kids were born here. But yeah, it does give you that sense of belonging. And the kids open a lot of doors, whether they really want to or not, that's just the way it happens. But the other thing I do want to talk about, because it really interests me, is that, we've spoken a lot about your career and what you've done. And then you keep on talking about the farm. So reconcile those two for us. How does an accountant end up on a farm?
I've had this question asked a few times, and
have you got a good answer by now?
Of the yeah, I should have. My Italian side of the family say to me, well, Paul, you're just going back to your roots, because my great-great-grandfather, Nono, was a farmer. And so, you're just doing what you need to do. As a Italian too, I do cured meats. So, I've got a cold room, a cellar, and so I'll make a prosciutto or salami or cheeses and hang it up. And so for me, way of switching off, and great way of just thinking about life in a different way. Most of us who have the careers that we have, it's go go go, and you don't have time to switch off, because by the time you get home well, guess what? Someone's got to cook the dinner, or someone's got to clean the toilet, or as the kids were growing up, someone had to sit with their homework. And being in Australia in an international company like EY and even Grant Thornton now, there's international calls, and all those calls are late at night because no Brit or no American wants to be on a late night call. So you're the one that the 3 o'clock in the morning type arrangements. So I think my career has always been on, and for 30 years in the professional world, where your targets get reset at the beginning of every year down to zero, and you got to go and reach more revenue targets because you get more senior, and out you go and and go get it. And so you're always on. And so the farm to me was a great way of just switching off. Now, you never do nothing. I mean, you'll probably know there's always something to do. The tree's fallen on the fence, or a cow's injured, or the horse needs its hoof done, or whatever it is. There's a snake in the paddock that someone's got to take care of. And so it's not a relaxing life, but it's completely different to what I know as a professional working life. And I just find it, absolutely. I get up there every weekend if I can, and just stand in the paddocks and do my thing.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah. It's a good answer. So we talking about the farm, but then there's another piece, Ben, that we, when we introduced Paul in the beginning, you've also spent a little bit of time in the community giving back, right? I mean, that's some of the personal time that you spend at Abbottsley, right? Is that right?
Correct. So Abbottsley is one of the, it's a girls' private Anglican school here in the Upper North Shore. And, the church we went to, the Reverend was part of the school on the board, and they were looking for an accountant that's a Christian, that had a student or girl in the school, someone who can give time to sit on the board as the treasurer.
Right.
And so, I said, yep, sure, I'll put up my hand. And this was in 2011. So we'd been here for, 4 or 5 years. And everyone said, but it's going to be a full-time role. And I said, well, I'll find the time. Now, the time came because, there was only the 4 of us here. And so we didn't have the aunts and uncles and cousins dropping in from time to time, or we had to go to, cousin's place. And so I found the time, but I also found it quite rewarding, because to me, as my daughter was going through, I'm thinking, well, how do I empower women to take on corporate Australia? And here, Abbottsley's fiercely empowering of women, and the school's been running for 140 years. And so it's one of the top schools in Sydney. And so for me, it was, how can I shape this and do my bit in the community for the faith, but also for females, and obviously my daughter. Now it did come. I mean, I had to wear 2 hats. I was the parent and obviously the board member, and within 5 years of being the treasurer, I got appointed the chairman of the school. And so I was the chair for the last 7 years of my time. And that's a big job, because you've got different stakeholders. You have the church, the Anglican church that owns the school. You've got the alumni group, the old girls that obviously been through the school and want the school to be run their way. You have, the teaching community. You have the government funding arrangements. You have the cohort of students. So there's many different stakeholders. And so balancing all of that was a challenge. But again, I've found it rewarding, and, put in play the right things. And there were challenges in my chairmanship. at the time there was in 2016, you might recall there was a referendum of same-sex marriage in Australia.
That's
And
right.
so it's an Anglican all-girls school. You've got to deal with that. Transgender, we're again a girls' school, so can boys who recognise as girls join the school? Or girls that recognise as boys, could they stay in the school? There were funding models. COVID happened during the time, so there were lots of fun things.
Yeah, no, I think that's very rewarding. But I suppose you when you bought the farm, I think that's probably the time that you decided you can't do everything, right?
Correct. So about 2 years into 3 years into having the farm, I said to Abbottsley that thanks very much. I've done my 12 years. I'm heading up there, and so yep. And that was also about the 3 years in of having the farm is when I said to Clayton Utes, thanks very much. I'm going to try something else. So yeah, the farm was a big component of the changeover in my life. But like everything, I'm still a young chicken, and I can't say I have school fees to pay because the kids are not in school anymore. But still got life to carry on with.
Yeah, no, Paul, it's been a wonderful conversation. Really has. We've just sped through this, and it's just been so interesting. From your time that you decide to do forensic accounting. It's almost like it reminded me of that TV series called House, right? That House set everybody lies, right? And so that's what you found, and your interest in that, and then coming to Australia and realizing that you might be losing a community, but it's very important to build on and be proactive with that, and then you realize that you've got to put a different life together as well, and say can't just work, and now you've got a different ambition that you're after, and I hope, Ben, that we can get our hands on a bottle of redemption. I think that's. Otherwise, it's just big talk, right? So we'll see.
Correct.
We'll see what that's right. So yeah, Paul, it's been fantastic.
Maybe at the next podcast we can do a taste testing, and you can give me some critique notes.
Yeah, no, we're not that sophisticated. Well, I'm not that sophisticated, but I probably do know a good wine. Any sort of last words from you, Ben?
No, just thank you, Paul. We, the challenge, for us is always just keeping it short, and because it's so many stories, so rich, so many things that you've done. I'm sure we haven't even cracked the little bit of it, and at some stage, Anton, we probably need to go back and go back on with some of these stories and explore a bit more, but. It's very tough to fit it in such a short time, but I can honestly say it's been a really good chat, and, just learning from you that, as Anton said, there's an effort part, that if you want to do things in life, you have to do them, they don't come to you, you have to go and get them. For that, I must congratulate you, things that didn't just fall in your lap, you worked for them and you made them happen. And if you reap the success of that, then you deserve it. So well done. And thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah. No, thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Anton. I appreciate it. There are a couple of bumps on my forehead because not every venture I've gone down has worked out, but such is life. But I do thank you, gentlemen, for the podcast. Thank you.
And take care of the sulfites. I think that's the most important thing, actually. All right, Paul. Well, thank you very much.
Correct. Thank you, gents. All the best. Bye-bye.